Hello and welcome. You're watching Hindustan Times. Germany's coalition has agreed to $1.9 billion in fuel tax relief for consumers and businesses. Now, this is in the wake of the Iran war, which has spiked fuel prices across the globe. DW's correspondent Thomas Sparrow joins us from Berlin to get us more on this. Thomas, always good to have you. Tell us the real implications of a decision like this. Does it genuinely have evidence in inflation dropping, or do you think this could be short-term relief or more like a political relief?
This is seen as a temporary emergency relief measure, not as a structural change here in Germany. So it is indeed significant, especially for those who use their vehicles a lot, or who need it for work. So lorry drivers, delivery firms, other companies in those areas. But it's not necessarily seen as something that could benefit other parts of society. Whether this particular measure could, for example, help reduce inflation in Germany, that is something that many experts do not believe, specifically because it is only a temporary relief measure. In order to actually reduce inflation, in order to actually ease pressures on German consumers on a longer period, other kinds of measures would be needed, both from a political perspective and also from an economic perspective as well. Now, inflation here in Germany is at 2.7%. That was in March. That is a number that is much lower than in other parts of the world, but that is definitely high for German standards. And that is also a matter of concern for the government. And that's why there is a lot of pressure on the German government to implement measures that go beyond this immediate emergency relief and that target specifically those longer effects of the war in Iran.
Also, how are citizens reacting to this decision?
There is a mixed reaction, especially those who will benefit the most in the next couple of months see this as a very important measure that will ease some pressures for them. But experts, and in particular critics, have warned that it was poorly targeted, that it was a poorly targeted measure from the German government because it specifically helps those who, for example, have vehicles or specific businesses, but it doesn't help pensioners, low-income families, in other words, people who have been mostly affected by the increase in prices, by the increase in inflation here in the country. An additional element of concern, especially those focused on climate measures here in the country, is that this will not reduce Germany's fossil fuel dependency. So those are measures that are being highly discussed. There's also a lot of pressure, as I stressed, on the government to make sure that this is not just a one-off political decision, but that more needs to come in order to really help consumers here in the country.
Also, from the European perspective, how does Germany's decision stand in the wake of other EU countries also facing similar energy crises?
So obviously Germany is not the only country in Europe that is targeting measures specifically aimed at helping consumers, especially helping drivers when it comes to these prices at the fuel tank. That's something that's evident in other countries around Europe as well. But what is evident is that the measures that need to come are not only national measures, but also from a European perspective. And this has to do with the fact that many European countries depend on oil and gas imports, so are particularly vulnerable when it comes to international crises like the crisis around Iran. So that's why, from a European perspective as well, there are measures that are being discussed on the one hand as short-term measures, for example, to help consumers with their electricity bills, but also longer measures to reduce that dependency from a European perspective. One measure that is being discussed there specifically is rolling out much faster access to clean energy, especially for consumers in the European Union. So what you can see from all this is that much more is needed. And there's also a diplomatic element here as well, because what is clear from a German perspective, from a European Union perspective as well, is that the best way to reduce the impact of the war in Iran on European consumers is helping to find a long solution, a durable solution to the war in Iran.
All right, Thomas, thank you so much for those updates from Berlin.